Billionaire sees a black waitress coding in the kitchen. Turns out she solved his company's biggest problem. What if the solution to your biggest problem was right there, serving you dinner with a smile? James Mitchell never expected that a routine business meeting at the Garden Terrace would change everything he thought he knew about talent and opportunity. The 42-year-old tech mogul sat in his usual corner booth, discussing quarterly projections with his board members, when something caught his eye through the kitchen's service window. There, during what appeared to be her break, a young waitress sat hunched over a laptop, her fingers dancing across the keyboard with the kind of focused intensity James recognized from his own late-night coding sessions 20 years ago. But this wasn't just casual browsing or social media. The complex algorithms flowing across her screen looked remarkably familiar, almost identical to the logistics problem that had stumped his company's entire engineering team for months. As she glanced up and their eyes met through the window, James felt something shift in his chest. Sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries happen in the most ordinary moments. Where are you watching from tonight? Zoe Washington had been working double shifts at the Garden Terrace for 3 years, and she'd perfected the art of making every customer feel like the most important person in the room. At 36, she possessed the kind of warm smile that could turn a stranger's bad day around, but tonight felt different. The weight of rejection letters from tech companies sat heavy in her apartment, each one a reminder that her computer science degree from a community college didn't carry the same weight as others. Still, she loved what she did with code, even if nobody else seemed to care. The evening rush had finally slowed when Zoe retreated to her favorite spot in the back corner of the kitchen, pulling out her well-worn laptop. She'd been working on something special for weeks, a supply chain optimization algorithm that could potentially revolutionize how companies managed their logistics networks. The inspiration had come from watching the restaurant's nightly chaos, how orders flowed from table to kitchen to customer, and all the inefficiencies she noticed along the way. "Still playing with that computer, Zoe?" called out Miguel, the head chef, as he cleaned his station. His tone was gentle but tinged with concern. "You know you don't have to prove anything to anybody." Zoe smiled but kept typing. "Just working on something that might help businesses run smoother. You know how our dinner rush gets crazy when we can't predict which tables will order what." "Yeah, it's like trying to conduct an orchestra when half the musicians are late," Miguel chuckled. "Exactly. But what if we could predict those patterns and adjust accordingly?" Her eyes lit up as she explained her concept, gesturing at the screen filled with flowing data models and predictive algorithms. Meanwhile, in the dining room, James Mitchell was growing increasingly distracted. His CFO droned on about profit margins, but James kept glancing toward the kitchen. He'd built his company, Technova Solutions, from nothing into a billion-dollar empire, but their latest project had hit an impossible wall. For 6 months, his team of MIT graduates had been struggling with a supply chain optimization problem for their biggest client. The solution seemed to dance just beyond their reach, costing them millions in delayed implementation. "James, are you listening?" Patricia, his board chair, tapped her pen impatiently. "We need to make a decision about the Morrison account by Friday, or we're looking at a $20 million loss." "I know the stakes," James replied, his attention still pulled toward the kitchen. "But maybe we're approaching this wrong. Maybe we're thinking too much inside the box." As the dinner crowd thinned, James found himself making an excuse to step away from the table. Something about the waitress's focused determination reminded him of himself in the early days, when he'd coded through the night in his college dorm, fueled by nothing but coffee and determination. He'd always believed that brilliance could emerge from anywhere, but somewhere along his journey to success, he'd started hiring from the same pool as everyone else. Tonight felt like a reminder that innovation often came from the most unexpected places. The kitchen service window offered a perfect view of Zoe's workstation, and James felt his breath catch as he recognized the complex mathematical relationships flowing across her screen. James stepped closer to the service window, his heart racing as he studied the algorithms on Zoe's laptop screen. The mathematical elegance was undeniable. She was working on something remarkably similar to Technova's unsolved logistics puzzle, but her approach was entirely different. Where his team had focused on brute force computational power, her code seemed to dance with organic efficiency. "Excuse me," James said softly, not wanting to startle her. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help noticing your work. Are you developing a supply chain optimization system? Zoe looked up, surprised to see the well-dressed customer from table 12 standing at the kitchen entrance. She'd noticed him earlier. He had the kind of intense focus that reminded her of her computer science professors, but his eyes held genuine curiosity rather than judgment. "Oh, I'm so sorry if I was disturbing your dinner," she said, quickly moving to close the laptop. "I was just on my break, working on a personal project." "Please don't close it," James said gently. "I'm actually fascinated by what you're building." "I'm James Mitchell. I run a technology company, and we've been wrestling with a very similar problem. Your approach looks revolutionary." Zoe hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. 3 years of serving tables had taught her to read people, and this man seemed genuinely interested, not just making polite conversation. "I call it Flow Sync," she said quietly. "It's designed to predict supply chain bottlenecks by analyzing patterns that most systems miss." "The micro-delays between decision points," James murmured, studying her code more closely. "You're treating it like a living ecosystem rather than a mechanical process." "Exactly." Zoe's face lit up. "I got the idea from watching how our kitchen operates. The best nights aren't when we have the most advanced equipment, they're when everyone anticipates each other's needs. The dishwasher starts prepping before the orders even come in. Miguel adjusts his timing based on the server's body language. It's all about reading the subtle signals that traditional logistics software ignores." But as Zoe explained her breakthrough, doubt crept into her voice. "Though I suppose it doesn't matter much. I've sent this to dozens of companies, and nobody's interested in ideas from a waitress with a community college degree." James felt something crack inside his chest. Here was exactly the innovative thinking his company desperately needed, but the person who developed it had been dismissed before anyone even looked at her work. The irony was painful. His own company probably had her resume in some rejected pile, filtered out by HR algorithms that prioritized prestigious degrees over actual capability. "Miguel, can you cover my last 2 tables?" Zoe called out, sensing this conversation needed more time. "Of course, Mija. Take all the time you need." If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Stories like this remind us that brilliance exists everywhere, just waiting to be recognized. As James pulled up a chair beside Zoe's makeshift workstation, he realized they were about to embark on a conversation that could change both their lives. But first, he had to convince this brilliant woman that her ideas mattered, even if the world hadn't recognized it yet. The question was, would she trust him enough to share her complete vision? Zoe showed James deeper into her Flow Sync algorithm, her initial nervousness melting away as she spoke about her passion project. For 20 minutes, they discussed supply chain theory like old colleagues, and James found himself taking notes on concepts his MIT-trained engineers had never considered. "This is extraordinary," James said finally. "Zoe, I have to be honest with you. My company has been struggling with this exact problem for months. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, had our best minds working around the clock, and we're still nowhere close to what you've accomplished here." Zoe's smile faded as reality crashed back in. "But I'm nobody," she said softly. "I serve tables for a living. I couldn't even get past the automated screening for entry-level positions at most tech companies." "That's the problem with our industry," James said, his voice heavy with regret. "We've created these artificial barriers that have nothing to do with actual talent. I built Technova to change the world through innovation, but somewhere along the way, I started hiring the same way everyone else does. My mom worked 3 jobs to put me through school," Zoe continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I graduated, I thought my degree would open doors. Instead, I learned that a computer science degree from City Community College doesn't impress anyone. So I've been coding at night, learning on my own, hoping that someday someone would give me a real chance." The pain in her voice hit James harder than any business setback ever had. He thought about his own journey, how he'd been given opportunities, mentorship, venture capital, all because he'd attended the right school and knew the right people. Zoe had developed superior solutions while working 60-hour weeks just to pay rent. "I've been thinking about giving up," Zoe admitted. "Maybe it's time to accept that some dreams aren't meant for people like me." "Don't you dare," James said firmly. "Zoe, what you've created here could transform logistics for millions of businesses. The problem isn't your capability, it's a system that can't recognize genius when it's right in front of them." But even as he spoke these encouraging words, James knew the challenge ahead. How could he convince his board, his investors, his entire company to embrace solutions from someone they'd never taken seriously? His phone buzzed with urgent messages about the Morrison account deadline. The corporate world demanded results, not feel-good stories about discovering hidden talent. "Look," James said, making a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "I want to propose something. Give me a chance to show your flow sync system to my team. Let me present your solution to our biggest client. But I need you to trust me, and I need to ask you to take a leap of faith." Zoe studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or false hope. 3 years of reading customers had taught her to spot insincerity, but James's eyes held something different, a combination of respect, excitement, and what looked like genuine determination. Have you ever faced a moment where someone believed in you when you'd almost given up on yourself? Let us know in the comments. What exactly are you proposing? Zoe asked, her heart pounding as she sensed her life might be about to change forever. "I want to hire you as our lead consultant on the Morrison project," James said without hesitation. "Full consulting fees, full credit for your work, and if FlowSync performs the way I think it will, I want to discuss a permanent position developing next-generation solutions for Technova." Zoe's hands trembled slightly as she processed his words. "But your team, your board, they'll never accept solutions from a waitress. Then they'll learn something about judging talent by the wrong criteria," James replied. "Zoe, I didn't build a billion-dollar company by playing it safe. The best decisions I've ever made were the ones that seemed impossible to everyone else." Over the next hour, James watched in amazement as Zoe walked him through FlowSync's complete architecture. Her system didn't just solve Technova's logistics puzzle, it revolutionized the entire approach. Where traditional algorithms relied on historical data patterns, FlowSync incorporated real-time microsignals that predicted disruptions before they cascaded through the supply chain. The key insight came from watching Miguel coordinate dinner service, Zoe explained. "He doesn't just follow recipes and timing charts. He reads the room, adjusts for each server's pace, and anticipates rushes based on weather and events." FlowSync does the same thing, but for global supply networks. James pulled out his phone and called Patricia despite the late hour. "I know you're going to think I've lost my mind," he began, "but I found our Morrison solution. And it's brilliant. James, it's nearly midnight. Whatever consultant you've discovered can wait until morning. This can't wait. Patricia, I need you to clear tomorrow afternoon's board meeting. I want to present FlowSync to Morrison on Friday as planned, but with a completely different approach." As James scheduled emergency meetings and began the process of integrating Zoe's work into Technova's presentation, Zoe felt her entire world shifting. 3 hours ago, she'd been serving dessert to table 12. Now she was watching this billionaire CEO restructure his company's most important deal around her code. "Are you sure about this?" she asked as James coordinated with his technical team via conference call. "You're risking everything on someone you met tonight." James paused his phone call and looked at her directly. "Zoe, I've spent 20 years in this business, and I've never seen anything as elegant as what you've built. But more than that, I've never met anyone who The next morning, James arrived at Technova's headquarters with Zoe at his side, knowing they were about to challenge everything his company thought they knew about innovation and talent. The executive team gathered in the main conference room, their faces reflecting confusion and skepticism as James introduced their new consultant. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales of unexpected connections and hidden potential. But as Zoe began demonstrating FlowSync to the engineering team, something magical happened. Within minutes, the room's energy energy shifted from doubt to excitement as seasoned developers recognized the breakthrough thinking behind her algorithms. The question now was whether this innovation could save the Morrison account and transform how Technova discovered talent forever. The Morrison presentation took place 3 days later in Technova's largest conference room. Zoe stood before executives from both companies, her community college diploma feeling both insignificant and revolutionary in her portfolio. As she walked through FlowSync's capabilities, something beautiful happened. The room forgot about credentials and focused entirely on solutions. "This is remarkable," Morrison's CEO said as Zoe concluded her demonstration. "Our efficiency projections show a 40% improvement over current systems. How quickly can we implement this?" James smiled as he watched his own board members' faces transform from skepticism to amazement. FlowSync didn't just solve Morrison's logistics challenges, it opened possibilities they'd never considered. Within 2 hours, they'd secured the $20 million contract and begun discussions for expanding FlowSync across Morrison's entire supply network. But the real transformation happened in the weeks that followed. Zoe officially joined Technova as Director of Innovative Solutions, but more importantly, she spearheaded a company-wide initiative to discover overlooked talent. James restructured their hiring practices, partnering with community colleges and focusing on demonstrated capability over prestigious degrees. "No one's fine," Zoe said one evening as she and James worked late on their next project. "I used to think success meant convincing the world to see me differently. Turns out, it meant finding people who already saw clearly." Miguel visited Technova's offices the following month, beaming with pride as Zoe showed him around her new workspace. "I always knew you were destined for something bigger than our kitchen," he said, "but I never imagined anything like this." "The kitchen taught me everything I needed to know," Zoe replied. "How to read patterns, anticipate needs, coordinate complex systems under pressure. It just took someone willing to see that experience as valuable rather than irrelevant." 6 months later, FlowSync had been implemented across 12 major corporations, and Zoe's team had grown to include other overlooked talents: a former retail manager who revolutionized customer prediction algorithms, a taxi driver whose traffic optimization system transformed urban logistics, and a retired teacher whose communication protocols improved team efficiency by 30%. James often reflected on that night at the Garden Terrace, how a moment of curiosity had led to both personal and professional transformation. Technova's stock price had doubled, but more importantly, they discovered that innovation thrived when they stopped looking in the same predictable places for talent. The company now partners with restaurants, community centers, and vocational schools, recognizing that problem-solving skills can be developed everywhere, not just in computer science labs. Zoe's story became a catalyst for industry-wide change, inspiring other tech companies to broaden their talent searches. On quiet evenings, Zoe still visited the Garden Terrace, not as a waitress but as a reminder of where her journey began. She'd often sit in the kitchen with Miguel, working on her laptop while he prepped for the next day's service. The familiar rhythm of restaurant operations continued to inspire her algorithms, proving that wisdom and innovation can emerge from the most unexpected places. Every problem has a solution, Zoe would tell new hires at Technova. Sometimes it just takes someone with a different perspective to see it. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales of unexpected connections. Thank you for joining this journey of discovery, and remember, extraordinary potential exists everywhere, waiting for someone to recognize its value.